Personally, for me, it was a way to kind of package all of these feelings into one place and at the same time feel like I'm doing something for the community, like giving back in a way. I mean, that sounds a little bit exaggerated, but just having a place where people could feel heard and connect to, because there's so much isolation in this work that it's hard to actually make those connections.
You're listening to the Global Inclusion in Practice podcast, sharing the stories of DEI changemakers around the world. Vivian Aqua and Marjolein Vlug bring you behind-the-scenes stories and kitchen table conversations about the personal perspectives of DEI professionals, representatives, advocates, and allies, talking about what matters in this work and what sustains us in creating lasting change. There are many of us working on creating a more inclusive world. Let's share our stories. We're in this together.
And welcome, Sarah Cordivano, to the Global Inclusion in Practice podcast. We are very excited to have you as our guest. There's plenty to say and to ask and to learn from you, to hear from you. Please introduce yourself to our listeners.
Hi. Yeah, good morning. My name's Sarah. I am originally from Philadelphia, but I currently split my time between Berlin and Zagreb. And a little bit more about me. So I've been working in DEI for several years, most recently at Zalando. And last year I published a book called Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, How to Succeed at an Impossible Job.
Yes, and already a classic, may I say.
And now I'm just working on some new projects and enjoying some well-needed rest.
That sounds amazing. And you mentioned Zagreb. May I ask why you are splitting your time between Berlin and Zagreb?
Yeah, so after 7 years of living in Berlin, I knew I wanted to live somewhere else. And my partner and I looked at a very complicated spreadsheet of all the places that we could move to and weather and standard of living and everything. And yeah, Zagreb came out on top.
Awesome. And also, what is a privilege that you have and use in your work?
Yeah, this is a good question. I actually have never been asked this before, which I think is interesting. I would say being an American has given me a lot of advantages and privileges in doing DEI work. So one of them is a very unearned privilege of people assuming that I know about DEI without actually, testing that knowledge, which is something that I've tried to do the work on. And second, I think it's my ability to communicate, which I think I learned that through the U.S. education system, just many public speeches and presentations to groups. And I think that's also helped me a lot in DEI work because it's given me a chance to really practice how to communicate, how to convince people of things, how to get them on board or argue topics in different ways, which I think can be really helpful in DEI work.
Definitely. And also you're mentioning a skill that is really valuable because you have to connect with audiences, right? Different audience with different stakeholders. And also you have to be able to be comfortable in the different ways of communicating. So what I envy and what I notice definitely with my American colleagues that I've known for so many years is that they have trained their speaking muscle for so many times that it feels very comfortable to wear that coat. Whilst for myself, I was dealing with an imposter syndrome. When I started out, I was just like, no, but you cannot act like you are Oprah. Not that I think of myself as Oprah, but I had her in mind every time that I'm talking, right? And what tip would you like to share to those who are feeling a little bit challenged when it comes to public speaking?
I think practice. I mean, just any chance you can to speak in a group, even if it's 5 people, raise your hand for podcast interviews, practice giving talks with your friends about topics you're passionate about. I think that this is how it comes, just like doing it over and over again and then asking for feedback and learning from that feedback.
Yeah, excellent. And what I really appreciate is that you're sharing these tips and you're also using that privilege and that skill in DEI. That's excellent. I mean, that's the thing about privilege, right? You use it for good purposes. And that's what you do. What makes you do DEI work? Why? I mean, people assume that you're good at it, but why did you then decide, I'll do that? Yeah.
So when I was younger, when I was studying, I never really thought about DEI as a career path. But when I look back at the different steps I took in different directions, I really feel like I've been unconsciously steering towards this path. So my professional background is sort of this Venn diagram of 3 skills that I think are perfectly fit for DEI. So the first is project management and able to bring order to chaos and deliver projects. The next is community work, so able to build community, understand how the motivations of communities, can come together to do great things. And then lastly, data analytics. So my career path most recently before DEI was actually in data analytics and working with complex data sets to understand patterns of information. So all of those things sort of fit together for me. And when I found myself working in DEI, I felt like I could pull from each parts of those experience. And I also find personally for me, I find it's a very valuable way for me personally to spend my time, because I feel like if I'm going to work in a for-profit capitalist structure, at least I can do something that to me feels like I'm bringing value to individual people instead of just an entire corporation.
I love that. And also everything what you were sharing. But DEI is very big, right? We have different lenses, different phases, different people, different countries, cultural norms. What is your corner when it comes to DEI work?
Yeah, so I know I already mentioned data a few times, but it's definitely on my mind lately. And I think being able to ask questions of data and move beyond anecdotes, so really back up the work that we're doing with actual numbers, I think that's a superpower, and I think that's something that we can all learn a little bit from. And then on the other side of the coin, and this is something that relates back to the book that I wrote, is around self-care and how do we manage our personal relationship with the DEI work we do. There's a whole chapter in my book about this, and it's something that I think about a lot, and I actually talk to people about a lot, because it can feel very lonely, it can feel very isolating, and it can feel like you have imposter syndrome that cannot be, that's actually not able to be resolved, because you're always looking up to someone else, and that person is showing you maybe a very optimistic picture of what their job is like, so you never really get the whole picture. So I think those 2 topics are really the things that I've spent the most time on and actually want to talk to people about more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. When it comes to data, I have something that I do want to ask, because the data that is being collected within the US is totally different than the data collected in the EU, for instance. What is something that you would like to share to the European Union if you had that 2-minute chance where you can talk about why it is important to collect data and to open up the GDPR thing?
Yeah, I think actually the way GDPR is written, it is possible to collect the data. There's some more considerations you need to put in place, but I think so many companies, they look towards GDPR and they say, oh, it can't be done. So actually, instead of talking to the government, I would talk to companies and say, don't perceive GDPR as an absolute roadblock and stop anything that you're doing because this big scary GDPR thing keeps you from moving forward. So I think a lot of companies have figured out how to do this in a safe way. And personally, I wish that more companies talked about how they did it, the legal considerations they thought about, and how they went over this big roadblock. And also, I guess to the government, I would say, please don't make those laws any more strict, because right now we're able to do some really good things with data, and the things that we can do have really fantastic impact for the employees that work at our companies. So I don't want to limit that.
Hi, I'm Vivian Aqua, the certified DEI consultant, and I would like to invite you to take your organization to the next level of understanding by collaborating with me. I specialize in helping organizations amplify their DEI initiatives and foster an inclusive environment. Reach out today to learn how I can help your organization unleash its hidden potential, and create a culture of belonging.
I love how you both love data. I mean, it showed up when you talked about the spreadsheet you made to decide where to move to, and it's everywhere. It's like it's the thing you love, one of the things that you love. And I really appreciate that that's one of the things you use to create that value in organizations to really create more inclusion, more equity. What is it like for you at this stage of your life to do?
Good question. I mean, I think you caught me at an interesting time. So I would say right now, I think it's very fulfilling because right now I'm working with organizations because I care about them and I want them to succeed, not for a paycheck. So I think that's been a really important shift for me. But historically, if I think back, what working in DEI in a corporate space has been like, I mean, it's challenging. I think there's a lot of personal conflicts that come up when you do that type of work. You have certain expectations of what you want the job to be or what kind of impact you want to have. And it's really hard to actually to keep, to bring those expectations to life. And you end up constantly reframing what your goals are and what you want to do. So, yeah, I mean, it's complicated. I think that as DEI professionals, we're often sort of in the middle of two strong decision makers or two stakeholder groups. So we've got like employees or ERGs on one side, and then on the other side we've got maybe HR or leaders on the other side. And we're trying to get everyone to compromise, and maybe eventually we get there. But by that point, no one feels good about that. It's been an exhausting journey, mm-hmm. And you put so much time and energy into that, but at the end, it doesn't feel like success. And I think that can be, that particular feeling can really shadow the work that you're doing because it's so much effort. And yet at the end, it doesn't really feel like, that everyone around you feels excited or happy about the decision.
And is that different now that you're doing more not-for-profit work or more purpose-driven work rather than in for-profit organizations?
Yeah, definitely. I think my role in those conversations is very different. So as sort of in an advisor role, my job is to give some perspective, share some feedback, but I'm not the one who owns those decisions in the end. And I mean, both it's good because those organizations are empowered to take that feedback with them. But at the same time, it's you don't have control over what happens. So that's
and then you let go.
Yeah.
What does that do to you when you can let go at this time?
I'm pretty early on in this current journey that I'm in. I left my job in May, so just a few months ago. So yeah, I mean, so far it feels good. I appreciate the distance that you have in these relationships, and yeah, and I really intentionally picked the organizations I wanted to work with because I think that they are doing good work and I want to help them succeed.
That sounds amazing. But in the previous question or during your answer of the previous question, you mentioned something about challenges. You dove into the two worlds where some of the DEI change makers are in between, right? What is a challenge that you are currently facing, or maybe a challenge that you faced in your previous role?
Yeah, I mean, currently I'm happy to say that I don't have many professional challenges that I'm trying to solve. Maybe some personal challenges keeping me focused mm-hmm. on writing and, dealing with the strange situation of not working for a paycheck is a very different mm-hmm. Challenge. But yeah, I think in the past, definitely trying to work with senior leadership teams to be visible on DEI mm-hmm. work, because I think without their role modeling, it's really difficult to actually have the work that you're doing cascade throughout an entire organization. So yeah, I think that's sort of an evergreen challenge that I faced, and different organizations have different flavors of that challenge. So yeah, that's something I don't think that we'll magically solve this. I think we'll always be trying to get those senior leadership folks to understand what we're doing, feel like it's their own personal fight to fight, and in the end, be an amplifier for the work that we're doing.
I think that's a big chunk of the work. Yeah. And right now, a big chunk for you is to navigate this type of living. Can you do something for me and close your eyes and imagine that you're sitting in a rocking chair and you're 97 years old and you feel the chair and you see the view and you smell the surroundings, and then you look back at today, at your life right now and the world right now. What do you see from there?
So I think I'll look back at this time positively. I think that this was this kind of period where I transitioned into DEI work, which happened back in 2017, 2018. Mm-hmm. I think it was a period of really immense growth for me and stepping outside of my comfort zone and really challenging myself to do something new. And I'm proud that I was able to navigate that transition. But also, I'm not sure if this is a forever job. So I'm not sure if 5-10 years from now I'm still doing DEI work. But I'm definitely very proud of what I've been able to accomplish. And yeah, I think I think we grow a lot when we force ourselves into new spaces and new experiences. So I think I've challenged myself a lot to do that. And also during the period of COVID and the economic crisis we're in right now, and the way some organizations are understanding the value of DEI, whereas others are sort of backing away. I think that's a really interesting time in the space. And yeah, I don't know what the next 2 years will look like, but I'm actually really, really curious.
I'm curious as well. I'm really curious because a lot is happening globally, right? But going back to you and the work that you do, what has been the biggest surprise that you have encountered in your work?
Oh, that's a good question. I think there are so many misconceptions and misunderstandings of what our jobs are. And it's almost funny to kind of step back and say, even if you just asked 10 or 15 people what they think the DEI role is, there's so much variation. And, some people see it as, a champion of every single different cause, even if they're just tangentially related to DEI. Some people see it as sort of someone who just stamps DEI approved on a stack of papers. Some leaders see it as the role to call, the emergency hotline to call when they have a screw up and need someone to quickly come in and fix it. And, there's a little bit of truth into every one of those things, but the reality is much more complex. And I think it can be really difficult to actually get everyone on the same page and try to convince or explain to your stakeholders what your role is when they already are so certain that they know what it is. So yeah, especially for an organization who's hiring their first ever DEI role, because you've got years of backlogs of frustration and screw ups and anxiety and everything that's kind of all of that. Those expectations are heaped on this one role, and it's very difficult as a first person in their first the first DEI role in the company to sort all that out and try to do something valuable in that.
And do it just in one finger snap. I mean, no.
So what you are saying, in a way, it's also very good to have the conversation maybe in the beginning of the assignment or maybe in the beginning of your role to create that understanding so that you can prevent the misconception of, okay, I think that DEI consultants or DEI leaders are supposed to be the fixers. And I always tell, we are not Olivia Pope, nor are we Harry Potter in this case, where we magically fix everything or make everything disappear.
This is such a good point. You just gave me an idea for a blog post. So
Sarah was taking notes.
Be my guest. We are not fixers.
And I was thinking, I don't think we want that.
No.
I don't think we want problems to just disappear because we're all in a massive growth phase. And if it just, if it was like that, you wouldn't learn a thing from it.
Yeah, definitely. And the organization wouldn't really have an opportunity to grow and evolve. They would just fix.
Yeah, I'm thinking my kids. I mean, if I just fix everything for them all the time, they're not going to learn. And you see that in people. You think, ooh, your parents have always sorted out everything for you, and now you get upset that the traffic light's red and it's not turning green for you. I mean, I know people like that. That's hard living. I'm curious, with challenges and with setbacks and with no quick fixes, and with moving and being in 2 different countries at the same time. What are the people around you that make you feel good and that inspire you?
Yeah, so I was actually just thinking about this in the last few weeks, and I just had a birthday. I turned 37.
Happy birthday!
And some friends of mine made me a board game that was essentially customized to a recent job that we all had. And it was sort of a satire on that work. And it was just such a personal and thoughtful gift that was handmade and, touched into things that I enjoy, like playing board games. So it was, and we got a chance to play it together, and it was a very cathartic experience. So I'm just thinking about, it's still fresh in my mind, and thinking about how it was a really thoughtful gift, but also made me feel really good and loved, and yeah, it was a nice
warm and fuzzy. Yeah, for sure. Wow, cool.
Why not listening?
Yeah, that's amazing.
Yeah,
and you'll get to play that again and again. Hey, are you ready to rediscover focus, clarity, and resilience, so that you can be a stronger change maker for diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging? I am Marjolein Vlug. I'm a certified coach. And whether you're getting started in DEI or are further along in your journey, I can support you to take your work to the next level. With me as your ally, you can gain clarity on your next initiatives or career goals, make intentional choices, stay accountable to them, deal with the intensity of the work, and create real change. Let's talk. I'd love to learn more about you. Reach out, book a chat.
Earlier on, you mentioned something about self-care, right? So one of the things that we love to ask fellow DEI change makers is, what are your resources for strength or energy or something that recharges your batteries to keep you going on?
Yeah. So actually writing the first book was a way for me to process my feelings of frustration with working in DEI. So not saying that everyone should go out and write a book. That's not what I'm saying. But, personally for me, it was a way to kind of package all of these feelings into one place, and at the same time feel like I'm doing something for the community, like giving back in a way. I mean, that sounds a little bit exaggerated, but just having a place where people could feel heard and connect to, because there's so much isolation in this work that it's hard to actually make those connections. So that was something for me personally, but I think more generally, I think distance is the absolute best thing that we can do. So getting some distance from the problems we have, either like physical distance, like traveling, or actually just mental distance, like taking 3 days and not thinking about such a challenge and then coming back to it with fresh eyes. I think you get a lot of perspective from that.
Yeah. You did say, sorry, you were saying that you don't want everybody to write a book, but then again, there is value in journaling, right? So you don't have to publish your book, but you can journal and process your day, because journaling is a way to reflect, or it gives you the perspective to reflect and to think about, okay, what can I do? And close that day off. Journaling is a great tool to put down your emotions, your feelings, or what happened that day, so that you can move on or process whatever happened that day and move on to the next.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Very different question. What's your biggest wish?
I mean,
right now.
That is a huge question. And I think if I think about the DEI space, I definitely think about, I want DEI to survive this current time we're in. Like, I would like 5 years from now for DEI to be still considered an important topic in organizations. And I think there's a lot working against that reality right now. So, we have to see what will come of it. And
what
a personal wish
from that rocking chair? At 97.
I think it ebbs and flows. I think there are always peaks and valleys. And I think the unfortunate thing about that is if organizations adapt so quickly to those peaks and valleys, they end up building up a huge DEI team. Okay, scaling that team down through attrition or through layoffs. Okay, now another crisis. Okay, then we scale up that team again. And that's such a shame, because then you end up losing all that momentum that you created when you did have a lot of resources on DEI. So I don't want to see that, but if I'm realistic and maybe a bit cynical, I think we probably will see that happen.
Yeah, it's funny how, you get these comics and visualizations and images and pictures that are drawn of, hey, this is what people expect is a growth curve and a learning journey, and this is what it actually is. And if you're listening to this, you're seeing my finger waving around wildly rather than going in a calm straight line. So that's part of it. Sometimes you plateau, sometimes you have some setbacks, and then you pick it back up again, and then you're higher up, and you think, ooh, look at where we've come now. And you get this vertigo, and you want to keep going. That's part of the thing. And then, that's why I appreciate you taking that step back and taking that distance that you just referred to, but then imagine that distance in time and see, hey, but this is actually the pattern. This is what's going on. Rather than, oh, we're in the downslope now. It's going to go downhill forever. No, it's not. Sure it's not. What's your personal wish?
Yeah, I mean, that's a good question. I'm not sure. I don't have a clear, thing that I'm working towards at the moment. Or I think with moving to Zagreb and kind of traveling back and forth between Berlin a lot this year, I definitely want to rebuild my sense of place and find that right location for myself where I feel, part of a community, and also want to stay for a long time, or at least for a few years. So that's my wish for the next year, to kind of figure out what that place is.
And building upon that, who are you becoming? Who is Sarah becoming?
I wish I knew the answer to that question, honestly. I don't really know. I'm giving myself some grace this year to figure out what I want to do next, where, professionally, but also personally, what brings me joy. So maybe we have this conversation again in a year and I'll have a different answer for you. But yeah, I'm giving it a lot of thought these days.
And what is helping you in that journey?
Yeah, I think space to think. And not putting expectations on myself, like, okay, my next job has to be working, DEI director at a corporate, like taking away some of those pressures, because I think that's how you sort of slot yourself into a certain pathway without much thought. And also just lots of open conversations with friends and talking to them about what brings them joy and what brings them fulfillment, and what goals are they working towards. It might not be, I have to climb this corporate ladder. It might be, okay, I'm going to work really hard for a year, and then I'm going to take 2 years off to get a camper van and drive all over. Like that's, that might be one path for a friend. And it's helpful for me to kind of hear those different goals, because it gives me some fresh thinking, like, what could my goals be?
I'm excited what's going to happen. And it's nice to hear how you get inspiration from other people too. Other people's input, whether that's, hey, that's what I want to do too, or hey, that hyperlinks me to something else, or hey, that brings me to, I want the opposite. That all helps, and community plays a big part. So I can't wait for you to find that even more. What would you recommend that our listeners read or watch or listen to? What have you listened to recently, or what has been really big and helpful for you that you'd recommend it to others?
Yeah, so I think it's always helpful to have some books or movies that are sort of a break from your day-to-day work and give you some time to have like a mental refresh. And one thing I've been reading and listening to a lot lately is the author John Green, and he has a book and podcast called The Anthropocene Reviewed. And it's essentially essays about just different aspects of life that have been influenced by humans, by humanity. And I find it very centering. So it's a good reminder how exceptional we are as a society, as a civilization, but also motivating to sort of find beauty in ordinary life. And there's many touching, emotional stories in his work. And yeah, I think it's great for DEI professionals to kind of step back from, you're working in a tech company trying to get them to think about DEI, to kind of step back and say, okay, wow, there's this huge world and really complex picture in front of us. And yes, my work fits into that story, but there's so much more than that.
So much more to the world. And that's another way of taking that distance, whether it's in space or in time or and by reading. Thanks.
What is important for other people within the DEI space to remember?
Yeah. So I think back about, self-care and how to avoid burnout in this work. And I think one thing that I remind myself of and my friends is that a job is a job. And, you can be very, very passionate about the work you're doing. You really want to make change, but ultimately it is a financial transaction. And there's important things to remember about that. You are paid to do your work, but you also have to know where your limits are and what you can and cannot achieve in that transaction. And yeah, so I think there's lots of times in our life when we can remind ourselves of the bigger picture, and also that, I want to do a great job in this profession, but at the same time, we also are, we happen to be doing DEI work, but we could be an accountant, or we could be a project manager or whatever. And our relationship with that work is not that different if you think about it. And we need to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves and prioritizing our own needs within that.
Yeah. Make it sustainable. Thank you. Thank you for the beautiful conversation. Thank you for bringing in your personal perspective and for bringing this lovely smile. I don't know if this is going to be a clip, because sometimes we have video clips, for most it's audio. So I just wanted to point that out. It's been inspiring, and it's been reinforcing, and it's been a joy. So thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I think this concept for a podcast is sort of we've intersected at a good time, and I think I've got the right space right now to think about these topics and answer honestly. And I think that's a gift to the community to hear people talk about this work honestly.
Yeah.
And it's a good time for you to talk about it. It's perfect. Yeah, thanks for sharing.
Thank you for listening. You're warmly invited to pause for a moment and think about what stood out to you from this conversation. Please share this episode with others to inspire them too. Make sure to subscribe to our Substack channel. We'll be back soon with more episodes. Be well, take care, and stay connected.